can find it.
Great. Okay, great. Well, I'll give you an introduction here, Sara. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Fred Sharman, the interim chair in the Department of Architecture. And it gives me great pleasure today to introduce Sara Caples, who along with Everardo Jefferson, is one of the founders and principals of Caples Jefferson Architects. So for some context, in the past decade, longtime participants in the fields of architecture and urban design have observed a kind of justice turn in practice and in discourse. And this is to an extent, I'd say, that we really haven't seen in the field since the 1970s. And this is, of course, a welcome development, but it's also very much worth noting that Caples Jefferson has been there all along. As their office bio states, this firm, founded in 1987, quote, has consistently created work at the intersection of social equity, education, and culture. So this mission and this consistency fits very well with the work we try to do here at Morgan State University, where I'm again very happy to welcome Sara Caples to the School of Architecture and Planning. So thank you, Sara.
Thank you. I want to apologize on behalf of my partner, Everardo Jefferson. He wanted so much to come to this lecture and meet, especially to meet this nice group of students that I see in the back of this Zoom. But he's been battling some crummy flu, cold, whatever it is, that's been going around the city, and he had a high temperature last night, and the doctor was like, So that's where we're at. And thank you for pivoting to Zoom. So I'm gonna just start. Of course, this is the our title of our talk and also the project of our firm. And usually for some audiences, I have to explain that a lot, but I think some people here probably already get it. I'll kind of delve into this a little bit as we go along. So first, I just wanted to, our firm is known for larger cultural projects and for educational institutions, but we still take on very small projects with a very specific impact in the underserved neighborhoods of New York, where we do most of our work. And this is typical. We did this during the pandemic. There was a diner that went out of business because, the pandemic. And it turned into a pop-up church for the Lutherans, the Lutheran Protestants. It's a growing smaller in many communities, but in this Hispanic community, it's growing. And so this pop-up church is to accommodate the congregation in this diner. And because it was a very limited lease, they didn't have much money. So it was just a little bit of sheetrock and basically leaving as much of the diner in place as we could. But just a limited interventions with a little bit of sheetrock, and an altar back, niches for the saints. And in this mostly Mexican population congregation, respecting not only could we create things, niches for important religious symbols for the congregation, but also a palette of colors that was something that had deep meaning for the congregation and gave them a sense of coming home when they come to pray on Sunday. And you can see on this other half of the diner when they have a fellowship meal. And so meeting people where they live, meeting people where meaning is important, where they have symbols, where they have meaning, has really been what has been the most interesting journey for our architecture. And it's what drives us and what we think makes our work deeper and of more artistic consequence. And we give a fair number of lectures, so we get pretty much maybe the same questions again and again. So we decided, okay, we'll kind of get in front of this and throw a few of these questions up and start to answer them. And then hopefully, after you've seen the slides, you'll have a few more questions of your own. So the first question that we get a lot is what we see as the central defining characteristic of our practice, because it's a practice that's known both for its civic qualities and for its artistic qualities. And I think I already explained a little bit the origin, the sources that we look to for art. This is Everardo and I co-founded this practice, as you explained, Fred, 35 years ago. And some of our collaborators have been with us as many as 25 years. Almost all of our key staff have been with us over 10 years. So it's a group of artistic collaboration. And our project, okay, erasing invisibility. I was talking to one of New York's prominent architectural editors and this afternoon, and he didn't understand from his perspective, from his perspective of privilege, what the heck we were talking about. I said, well, Nick, look around you. Who do you see people trying to erase? Who do you see people trying to be made invisible? And our project is to erase that invisibility. So sometimes we're swimming with the tide, sometimes we're swimming against the tide. But in this picture, there's an army of people, for instance, in New York that goes out every night to deliver dinners and who worked all through the pandemic and kept the city going. And I dare say the people in this heated eatery, who do they see? Do they see each other? Do they see really the whole city? And who speaks for the people on the bikes? Who speaks for the people in the neighborhoods where Everardo and I work? So that's really important to us, that we are the conduit for many voices. And that's the name that we gave our book, where we talked, our publishers are the Brits, the Royal Institute of British Architects. And they wanted us to do a book about our work. And in the end, it's about half of our work, but it's about half work of other practitioners all around the world who are dealing with the same issue. And in almost all instances, our contention in this book is it not only makes architecture that's appropriate in communities, but it makes architecture that's more interesting for its inhabitants. The people, the users of these buildings are the people that own them. We kind of go away. If they're not loved, what have we done with the precious resources in these neighborhoods? So that's really important. And that people's stories, their mark on the neighborhood is visible and welcoming to other people in the neighborhood. That's really drives us a lot. So one of the questions, another question that seems like it's a shift, but you'll see it all kind of starts to come together maybe, is when did we first recognize that we wanted to be architects, Everardo and me? So we have different stories. Everardo immigrated to this country from Panama at the age of 12. He was the first person in his family to graduate from high school. Um, and he went to night school for a couple of years before he discovered that some of the teachers told him there were these things called scholarships and he could go to college all day long and not have to go only at night. And so he ended up going to industrial design at Pratt Institute and, of course, working odd jobs still. But he um, discovered that he had a real gift for making forms and a passion for design that was very, very deep. And somebody started to talk to him. He had won a prize for a design for how to package eggs. And somebody said to him, well, you know, architecture, you don't have to stop at the scale of eggs. You can start to explore space at the scale of people. And so he that's how he got intrigued with architecture. And then he went to architecture school, like some of you all that are in a postgraduate program, and it is leading our practice. And my story is different. I'm a service brat. I lived a lot of different places. Um, and I was, I guess, a typical girl pre-feminist revolution. So I started to think about I'm maybe I could be an interior designer, and one of my friends' mothers said to me, "Well, why don't you do the whole thing?" I was like, "Oh, I could do that. I could design a whole building." So that's really so the thought was placed in my mind by a mentor. And that was so important that somebody in your teenage connection helps you look higher, raise your sights. And that is really what happened to me. Um, so a question that we often get is, well, how did you get into this so much earlier than other people? And what were the early years of your practice like? Well, I think we got into it obviously because it was important to both of us that we do work in neighborhoods uh, that are neighborhoods like the one in New York where Everardo grew up in the South Bronx. And our first steps, this is one of our very first projects. This was a preschool for children with full-blown AIDS, which I'm happy to say is not, there are treatments that keep children from going through this, but this first generation in the AIDS crisis, that's what existed. And so, and our clients who were part of an organization called the Association for the Help of Retarded Children, who had gotten into preschools for special needs children. It was in the old burlesque offices of this theater in the Bronx. And we came in, Everardo and I had both worked in high-end architectural firms. And we thought we were meticulous designers and that we knew a lot about design. And we started working on this job and we realized very soon that we didn't really know at all what we should know to design something that was really important for the people using the school. We thought as high-end designers that we had to design, you know, this idea of Gesamtkunstwerk, of the total work of art, that we had to design every corner of every space and make it perfect. But then as we started to work on the classrooms, the teachers were like, wait a minute, I've got to be able to vary this room from month to month and year to year as I have different populations of kids that have different dynamics. And you need to empower me and give me a way to control light and spatial arrangements, but you've got to give me a lot more agency. And then in the public spaces that were kind of neglected, that didn't have that kind of ownership, we had to bring in things that were a lot more defined. And we wanted to bring in daylight everywhere. And at that point, those old burlesque offices, every afternoon, there was a drug caravan that would go down the Grand Concourse in the Bronx. It was a very unsafe neighborhood at that point, and people would crawl on the roofs to see if they could break in skylights. So we had to create this protected skylight to let in light, but we wanted to do it in a way that wouldn't frighten the children and the families, that would still keep bad people from breaking in, but that would kind of welcome everybody that was in the school and make them feel safe but happy, safe and happy. So color and daylight, those were things that we work with a lot. And those are things, as you can see, that we have to specifically deal with issues like safety, with issues like cultural backgrounds. And Heritage Health and Housing is a perfect example. This was a abandoned garage. You can see the garage is just before it was abandoned here in this photo, and a social club that went all the way through the block. And our clients were an agency that provides services for people coming out of prison who have a witch's brew of mental health problems. And so our clients had almost no money, but we called them the saints. We needed to create someplace that would be appropriate for their home. So we said, okay, let's cover the garage and let's cover it with colorful panels, and invite people in, create an anchor in the neighborhood that says something special going on here. And so this is a rendering that we did in conjunction with the artist that we brought on board, a wonderful artist named Nathan Slate Joseph. And this is kind of a collage of our drawing and Nathan's visualization sketch. And we were kind of showing light. And when it was installed, we thought, okay, now they're going to be really excited. But we got a call at midnight from the executive director, Ana Pereira. And she said, darlings, I don't know how to tell you this, but it's a disaster. And we were like, Ana, a disaster? What's a disaster? You know, and she said, I don't know what we were thinking. For my group of clients and my colleagues were mostly Hispanic Harlemites. And for us, the colors blue and green, especially, they're kind of the colors of being depressed. And we needed something brighter. So we called up Nathan and said, Nathan, what can you do? And he was like very cool. He said, no problem. We'll come in and change it. And so we did. We worked together, and this is where we ended up. And we called Anna and her colleagues back, and we said, okay, what do you think now? And they were like, yeah, it's a patchwork like us, you know. So that was really one of the first instances where we understood how important it was to understand not just sort of color abstractly, but color as people interpret it in their own culture. And, strangely enough, so, Health and the agency grew, and they've moved to a bigger facility, and as you can see in this photo, this part of Harlem is being built out like you wouldn't believe. It was rezoned, and so this is about to be replaced by one of these monsters. But this we were looking at Google Earth one day, and Google Earth really had this picture of Nike using this neighborhood. This is an example, this anchor, even after it was abandoned, as a sort of uh, personification of neighborhood cool. And I think it's interesting how work that is specific to each neighborhood, if it's really strongly anchored, it has that ability to speak back out to people and to invite them in. And the other thing that was really important at uh, Heritage Health and Housing, you can see that little facade down there on the lower left, sorry. But you can see that most of the building was landlocked, and it meant that most of the building had no daylight. And so it was really important to us to bring the light into the entire building, into every worker, and a light as a giver of health and a conveyor of optimism. And these things in this axon are the diagram. You can see the building, the garage is lower and the social club is higher, has more stories. But each of these slots, uh, we had a big debate when we were making these light slots about what kind of skylights we would use. If we would use long continuous ones, we used a theater lighting analogy like floods. Or if we used off the shelf 3x3 uh, uh, skylights, but we put them toward the end where the way the light would hit them, it would maximize during the day, the angle. So we put them at the east end so that you'd get the morning light all the way moving around in the afternoon light as spots. And we ended up using the spots. And here you can see this abstract photo. You can see how they glow even during the day. And there are a few windows, but just at a few floors. And here you can see how and our clients couldn't afford glaziers. We really did this renovation for $65 a square foot with apprentice carpenters. But you can also see that we wanted people to be able to understand the operation of the light, that it wasn't meant to be mysterious. The material enclosing the slots is polygol, so it could be put in by carpenters. It was much cheaper than glass. And you can see the skylight up here. And it comes all the way down to the basement. And the basement, we had a lot of problem cleaning out mold. And then once the skylights were opened and the slots, it healed the entire building, the daylight. It was really miraculous. But it also, about a year after this was built, our clients came back to us, a new director, Jorge, and Jorge was like, well, you guys probably don't know this, but in these slots, the light moves around. And we were like, okay, well, that's cool, Jorge, that you saw that. What do you think about that? And he said, well, about the end of the afternoon, and remember, these are all the saints working there. So a lot of the employees were very spiritually driven people. And we just stop and we say a blessing as we see the light at the end of the day. So, for an architect, when you hear something like that about something that you've worked on, that is gold in the heart. So, another question that we get, how do we design for more than one culture at a time? Because that's certainly that condition of intersectionality. Not only do you experience it at Morgan State, it's like the condition for much of New York and its neighborhoods. So one of the projects that we did is a theater in a place called Flushing Meadows Park, which was the World's Fair Park in 1940 and in 1965. And this site was the New York State Pavilion, where Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix played in this open pavilion. And you can see when we started work here, most of this pavilion had fallen into rust and was very frightening. And so what had been the Theaterama was converted into a 700 person civic theater with 3 venues. And this is one of the venues that we put around the original Philip Johnson thing. And we created also something, our clients often come to us with these programming things that sound logical, but wouldn't create a place that's very special. So our clients are like, can you give us a big lobby? Because people have trouble finding this, and with 3 venues, we need a way of sorting out. And we said, well, we can give you a giant party room that people come through and that you can also use for, you know, uh, coming of age parties and weddings and whatever, bar mitzvahs. And this is in Queens, which has the greatest ethnic diversity of almost any city in the world. I think it has something like over 200 official languages that are spoken. So it is really cross-cultural. So you'll see, we first was to make this site accessible and to bring people in from the larger park and to let them know that it's there. And so this diagram shows the lobby, which everybody calls the nebula now. And of course, the lobby is meant to pick up on this circularity of the Philip Johnson 1965 design and kind of restate how special that is, and also create a kind of a viewing platform for its eventual restoration. And so you can see how that operates as a site plan. You can see how we're bringing people in from the larger park and swirling around this circular element, which looks small in this context, but which is big enough for 600 people to attend a reception. And so these circular forms kind of participating in that circularity and celebrating it, with these counterpose swirls. We also created an inverted dome, because if we had a dome that went up like that, that's an acoustic nightmare. But if we inverted it, it would be legible through the glass from the larger park, and it would also be another riff on circularity. And we started out with a white inverted dome. And that was great until we put together some kind of informal user groups from a variety of different cultures that make up Queens. And it was very quickly pointed out to us that in Asian cultures, white is the color of death, and that this did not come across as celebratory to a number of people looking at the project. And so we started to do research about how different cultures map meaning onto different colors. And we found this one color that is a little more golden than this, that's interpreted by almost every culture on earth as celebratory. So we came to that. And that's a visioning sketch. And here we are with the built artifact. And we also, these on the circularity, we had these riffs of Everardo had this idea that not only should these cuts into the inverted dome be angular to bring light in at these different angles and dramatic moments on the floor, but they should also be a lens to look back up at the abandoned state pavilion and you start to create a public in a safe, protected way for its eventual restoration. And now that is happening. People went back to bat to fight for the restoration of those structures, and it is actually happening now. Here, you can see we're in the nebula toward the sunset. And the other thing this color does, when we kind of heightened it at the edges here, is to capture the light, especially as the sun sets and people come to the theater. And here we are at dusk. And so it's really interesting how a precise intervention can really create a larger set of consequences, and also how a precise layering of meaning in the architecture, something that really reflects meaning for its community, can become loved. And I have sort of two more projects to show you. So this project, how do you design to celebrate a heritage? That was the main brief here. There are remnants of a village in Brooklyn before it was a borough of New York, when it was a series of independent communities. There was after slavery ended in New York in 1828, freed people were determined to purchase and land and create their own community. And a longshoreman, because Brooklyn is like Baltimore, it's a port community. The longshoreman was named James Weeks, and this community was known as Weeksville. And you can see our project here in the context of the larger city. And you can see this half a block here is both the remnants of the community and the new campus that we created around it. And even how this community was rediscovered, this is like a classic architect story. There was in the 60s, there were in the Black community, there were people who were really interested in African American history, and not just in general, but what really happened in New York, because I didn't hear about it in school. Again, these issues of erasure. And so they started to do research in the historical societies and found out about this village, Weeksville. And one of these researchers got a buddy of his who was a planning professor at Pratt, who was also an amateur helicopter pilot. And they flew over where the descriptions of were for Weeksville, and they saw these 4 houses off the grid. And then they knew the grid was subsequent to Weeksville. So they went down to the ground and discovered descendants of the people who had built Weeksville were still living in these houses. And so here we're looking at the end of the block before our project was built. But you can see these rediscovered houses through there. And the neighbors called this the long view. And the rediscovered houses, and once the block had been, the subsequent houses on the block had been pulled away, they wanted to keep that long view and have the history speak for itself. So that was the first thing. And then our landscape architect, Elizabeth Kennedy, did some brilliant research. The lots of the in front of the houses had been so torn up, there wasn't any real, we sent archaeologists out there to do a dig before we completed design, but everything had been really torn up. But Elizabeth mapped what we called the ghost road in our office. The road that Weeksville, the old country road that had been an Indian trail that Weeksville located itself along. And we used that as a generator of both the landscape layout for the new campus, which is all of this, and even where you enter in the building, you're walking along the Indian Trail that then became known as Hunterfly Road. And you're walking along Hunterfly as the ancestors would have done when they built this village. And it was very important. We had uh, a charge from the City Art Commission. We originally designed a series of very Afrocentric forms for the new community center because these houses were not designed to have a busload of 45 kids come and visit, but now we need to accommodate classrooms and offices and gatherings for 250 people and galleries and all sorts of things associated with this cultural institution. And so the Art Commission rejected our Afrocentric forms and made our clients really look at examples by Carlos Scarpa and Sfera Fenn and asked us to redesign in what we considered very Eurocentric language. So we were determined to, that we had no choice. We had to redesign to honor that request, but at the same time, we needed to do it in a way that would honor also the real history of this place. So I've talked about the planning considerations, and you can see here the Ghost Road. You can see how these forms wrap around the history and how they open up here at the end to, again, open up the views and frame them and call them out as important. And it was very important to the community that the city recognized that the surrounding Black community has aspirations for being good stewards of the earth. And so it was important to do things like power the heating and cooling with this field of 50 geothermal wells. one of the first projects in New York City to do that. But it was also very important to us to manifest the both the deep heritage of the diasporic descendants from this West African diaspora and the pride in this history that had led to its rediscovery. And so we looked at art from the origin of the diaspora, and we looked at patterns and colors, and we started to find ways to incorporate that into the materiality and the expression of the building. And not only in things like this study, like paving patterns and stone patterns, but also in things like the configuration of exposed structural framing. And of course, in terms of the run of colors and materials that reflect back colors from this West African art. And so you can see this structure, how it reflects these sort of basket weave patterns. And you can see the layering of patterns. And we were told by critics and reviewers that using patterns, they thought it was a cliche. And we said, you're not going to think it's a cliche. And anyway, what do you care? It's important that people that use this building, that the neighborhood, that these are pieces of history that they recognize and that speak to their history. But we're going to do it not only at all these levels that I've explained, but even in the shadows. And so, because this is a LEED Gold sustainable building, and we can use different darknesses of glass to cool this 16-foot wide activity space, we also said, oh, then that when you walk in, you'll see this pattern on these other patterns in one place when you come in, and in a different place when you go out. And we looked at Congolese fabric. This fabric was once owned by Matisse. And we said, you know, instead of just having those dots on the glass, we can have a custom pattern. And even the fence, we said, you know, let's, instead of having just New York City park pickets, let's have these, let's design pickets that are evocative of baskets and agriculture and that also move subtly in space. And so here we are coming out of the bodega catty corner from the site, and here's how that building really is. And you can see framing the historic houses. You can see the fence, the patterns. You can see the opening that takes you along the entrance opening that takes you along Hunter Flying, the Ghost Road. And here you are seeing these patterns up close, and this beautiful Vermont purple and green slate that evokes these colors. And here we are looking back at that corridor and the framing, and a wonderful work by an artist named Shakaya Booker. And the Ghost Road, and of course it was important to make the whole site accessible, and to lead your eye back to the surrounding neighborhood as well as inside the precinct of the preserved village. A bench. And here is the multi-purpose room where everything from lectures to dance performances and yoga classes takes place. And here's that corridor with those shadows. And you can see the larger scale of shadows at the floor, and you can see the pattern of the frit casting the smaller scale of shadows up toward the skylights. And everywhere, of course, your eye is led back to the village. That's the reason for this site. And even when you're walking along the sidewalk, the shadows ask you to think about the special precinct that this place is. So we had another enormous privilege, which was to design a museum about a great American artist, an artist whose work has changed everything that we hear. And of course, I'm talking about Louis Armstrong. Louis Armstrong, jazz solos, how jazz interacts, scat singing that he brought mainstream, how jazz interacts. Louis was pivotal. And whether you listen to hip hop or Afrobeat or K-pop, you're hearing Louis's legacy. And the people Louis lived in a neighborhood in Queens called Corona. So Queens is a borough of New York. It's another community next to Brooklyn. And Louis had lived on he had lived in hotels most of his life. And his fourth wife, Lucille, wanted a house. And there weren't that many places in New York where even a great African American, even one who was a great musician and a great star, could live. And so she bought this house, and in an African American neighborhood in Queens, and Louis fell in love with the first house he had ever owned, because he was on the road over 300 days a year. And he was creating this incredible music, of course. And one thing that happened to us when we started meeting with the neighborhood is people kept on saying how they wanted this building to stand out because they wanted people to know about this genius in their midst. So this is Louis's house. And you can see he when he was home, he would go to the local barber shop. He would have kids come and hang out on his steps. He was really a very down-to-earth person. He never got stuffy or egotistical in that way. And this is his study up here and his porch. So our site, it was catty corner from across the mid block. So you have to approach the building that's the archives, and that is an exhibit and is all about Louis, kind of diagonally across the street. And Louis and Lucille, one of the things they built before Louis died was they took an empty lot next to their house and they built this enormous garden for the neighborhood. So we knew that they loved planting and they loved green, and we think they would have loved the idea of sustainability. So that was important to incorporate. And from that diagram, you realize that this building would be approached diagonally from Lewis's house and even more diagonally as people came up and down the street, especially from the subway. And so we wanted to create this urban precinct, and we wanted to create something that would be perceived from the diagonal as well as frontally. And so as we started to develop it, we also, because this is a sustainable building, we decided to cool this. We needed to have glass that had all of these layers for security because this is a museum full of artifacts. So it has to be very secure at night. But we also wanted to use screening inside, embedded in the glass. We embedded a custom brass mesh, which also, of course, is derived from Lewis's trumpet. And even on the roof of this overhang, creating the urban precinct, we used brass, trumpet brass. And so the idea was really to proclaim this genius in the midst of the neighborhood. And here you have the building. So this is really how it played out. And by day, it looks opaque from the outside and transparent on the inside. And then at night, when the lights reverse and it's brighter inside, you're invited to come in when there are events in this building. And much of this is for the neighborhood. And it was very important to us to keep the building compressed down at the scale of the surrounding structures, but also to proclaim this exceptional person who made this music from a neighborhood like this. And here you are inside the building looking back out at Lewis's house. And you can see even from the inside as the afternoon sun sets, you get these reflections and the brass singing its song to you. And even these columns, we worked with the musicians and director. These columns are with their brass notes. If you're an 8-year-old kid, you probably just think that looks kind of different. If you're a lifelong musician, you probably understand these are the opening notes, the incipits to Lewis's great hits. And of course, you come into an exhibit which shows what an exceptional person Lewis was. He appeared in, he was one of the first African Americans to have starring roles in films. And so he not only had an incredible number of gold records, he was absolutely at the technological forefront of his time in terms of performance and in disseminating his work. And, you know, every building has some space that's that you have to rethink. So here we had something called a multi-purpose room, and it's like, oh, you mean like the hotel ballroom? I don't think that's going to be great. But what if we made it a jazz club? And we bounced that off the director in the neighborhood, and they were all, especially the director, who wasn't a jazz musician himself, understood that that could be really great. And our point was, if we make it a jazz room, it'll do all those multi-purpose things. You can have parties, you can do this, you can have lectures, concerts, all of that. But you can create a place for the living legacy of Lewis's music. You can create a place where artists come and do their thing. And in fact, it's turned out, even though this is a very intimate room, it's about 75 people, so it's the size of a small nightclub. Both young artists and even kids just learning to play the trumpet play here, but also some of the most famous jazz musicians in the world are lined up to come here and perform because they can do things in a room of 75 people that they can't do when they have to sell 5,000 tickets a night. So, like Esmeralda Spalding came here with a quintet, and she wanted to experiment how to bring dance back into modern jazz. And within 2 minutes of her starting her performance, the whole room was standing up and dancing, and they danced through the whole concert. And that's what you can do architecturally. That's what you can connect with if you work hard to reflect the culture and the values of what you're celebrating. And here we are coming in, up in, so up in the top, it's more archives and conservation workers. And here, it was very important to us. We do a lot of sort of pirate zoning and building code things where we look at opportunities that people usually don't see. So we figured out a way to bring a continuous slot of light along both landlocked sides of this upper story. And this is the roof of the jazz room. And of course, this had just been planted, but it flowers. In a couple of weeks, it'll be a riot of color and flowers. And this is where the building conservation, the artifact conservation is done by the museum. And it's also a gift back to the surrounding neighborhood so that Lewis, as he always intended, all his buildings are good neighbors. And here's the porch, which looks back out on Lewis's porch. And the day that the new center was dedicated, the center got 14 of the greatest cornet players living. And some of them were on this porch. And some of them were on the porch across the street in Lewis's study. And the building itself, this reflector, participated. They played Lewis's greatest hits across the street to each other. So that is the pleasure of doing this work. Thank you.
You so much, Sarah. I'm sure the students have some questions too, but I wanted to take first if I could. One of the things that's great about seeing this work right now with this group of students is that we often try to work with social programs, with institutional programs that feed into the public realm here at Morgan. And so much of your work is doing that. And it's doing that in ways, and I mean this in the best possible way, that are so New York. It's fantastic. How do you engage with, like, when you all go to other cities, how do you all start doing the kind of research that that feeds this New York work so well? Like, how do you get started when it's a different kind of place?
So we have a project right now in Kazakhstan
Hmm.
because one of our clients is the US State Department. And the ambassador actually put up a yurt in his backyard because he wanted to create a structure that was respectful of the culture of the Kazakhs. But then the security people came and said, well, you can't keep the yurt because we have all these security standards that you have to have this bomb-proof shelter and all this craziness. So, we, uh, very quickly designed something that, uh, is a building that sort of reflects the ambassador's residence on the outside, but when you go in, the spatial abstraction is a yurt. And we didn't presume to know how to decorate it. So what we did more and more, what we try to do with our projects is to create a situation, even though it looks very spatially specific, very architecturally specific. It's very important for these buildings that last 100 years or 200 years in the public realm, that in fact they have a lot of flexibility and a lot of room for other people to map onto them, to continue to make them, uh, to continue to create things. So in this yurt room, we have just a series of hanging devices, of continuous hanging devices, so that we saw that the Kazakhs tend to put layers and layers and generations of carpets and carpeting. So we said, okay, we're going to give you a system. And there could be some US ambassadors who think they just want a white box. And there could be other ambassadors who want to work with the local Kazakhs and cover the place in carpeting. And in a way, we have to provide opportunities more than final conclusions. So, very often these days we are brought in. We're just starting a music camp up in New York, up in about an hour and a half north of New York. The Aaron Copland organization hired us after Louis Armstrong to create a campus where contemporary composers will bring their teams and complete pieces, and there could be 6 to 8 teams. And the composer could bring their dramaturg and their choreographer and their whatever. They could bring up to 6 to 8 people. So we're just in the process now of exploring with musicians, with locals, with all kinds of people, what and this is an existing campus that we have to transform, that was a former Episcopalian day school and convent. And so we have to make it non-sectarian, but also the spiritual qualities, nonetheless, in Aaron Copland's music are intense. And he took from American spiritual tradition, not necessarily the traditions that informed his family, who were Jewish immigrants, but Shaker music and all these different sources and Mexican music, all of these. He wanted to celebrate the whole rich tapestry of America, and so creating a space that different people, different composers can come and map different things on. And of course, creating all these different venues for music at different scales, from one person practicing to 15 people to 60 people to 200 people, not one place that has to do all those things, 6 or 7 or 8 places that do those different things. And giving people also the connection with nature that exists on that site, and making the site completely energy independent, generate it, not only take care of its own water and sewage, but generate its own energy, both from geothermal and from solar, especially. All of those things, what architecture results from that, the whole idea of circularity, of reuse is much more important. than it used to be, and we think Aaron Copland would have loved all of that. So it's all these layers, and it's kind of like we do design after design, and it's never a process where, oh, we got it and now we're finished. It very often the design doesn't coalesce till quite late in the schematic or design development phases, the early phases of the project. It might look very different mid schematic, and the client might approve it. And then we find out that we're missing that if we move it in a slightly different direction, or that we center it on a different idea, it comes together, it coalesces in a place that people can understand and that has a direct meaning that they can feel. And that's when it really comes together. So that process, it's not like you can predict it at the beginning of the project. You can only kind of try to set it up to be receptive to that process, and then try to be attentive and try not to get stuck as you move through it.
I love that idea of creating opportunities. Let's open up to others. You guys want to take questions, and then I can repeat to make sure that Sara can hear them. Somebody's holding back. I know at least one person is.
How long would you say it take just doing initial research into, like, for instance, the life of Louis Armstrong, before you dive into actually designing?
Did you hear that, Sara? The question is like, how long do you take to do research? For example, Louis Armstrong.
Yeah. So it's really a process that so we get these schedules where these things are nicely discreetly one bubble follows another, and you finish bubble one and then go into bubble two, research bubble and report, and then you do schematics, and then schematics is done, and then you do design development, and that's a more detailed level. That all sounds great, but I think it's more the type of research that we do, and it overlaps the design process, because we start to analyze a site and a program very early, and we very often redesign the program. Of course, I didn't talk about money, but money is important to our clients, and if we can, sometimes we get these programs that have too many spaces, and they have too many subordinate spaces and not enough focus. And so there's a process of learning what the institution really does. So that's one kind of research. And of course, it's full of graphic explorations, because we have to test all these things. There's another type of research, which is learning about the history of the site, learning about the physical characteristics of the site, everything from hydrology to geology to what was there before, what is the history of from the time in America of the indigenous Americans to the present on this site. So that's another kind of research. There's usually a research around, like that first project that I showed you, the preschool. One of the things that we discovered that we didn't understand well enough was the pedagogy, the theory behind how they taught the kids. And there was certainly not good literature on how to design preschools as opposed to middle schools where there was lots of literature. And so we ended up writing what is still one of the guide articles for the Association for the Education of Young Children. Because we needed to kind of understand the precepts, but we also had to go into the literature of the theory behind their preschool teaching. They were very influenced by Montessori and Reggio Emilia theory
Mm.
of teaching young children, which teaches young children through experiencing, whole body experiencing, and through exploration. And we had to understand that better to really start to understand why it was important for us to design some places down to more detailed level and other places to figure out when the teachers say they want to be empowered, well, what is it that we're really providing to empower them? What are the anchors in these rooms, and what should they be able to change? So all of that research, it might start at that study period, but some of it goes on as we keep on discovering things that we don't know. And
Mhm.
and that move us to try to change the design, because research like this camp that I'm telling you about, one of the things that we're doing, and it's similar to what we did for Queen's Theater in the Park. Queen's Theater in the Park, we studied theaters in parks all around the world, from Glyndebourne to all these different places, to find out how different people understood the interface between a park and a theater. And
Mhm.
if there was a special dynamic that was different from theater on 43rd Street and off Broadway, and a theater in the middle of a World's Fair park.
Yeah.
And so we're doing that again with this Aaron Copland campus. We're looking at campuses where music is created. There was a British composer named Benjamin Britten. British Britain, okay. And he and his partner, Peter Pears, created this campus in rural England, again, for the creation of music. And so we're looking for campuses for creation of music all over the world to see what we can learn from that. You know, whether it's the Santa Fe Opera, this English one is called Snape Maltings. So all these different things. So that's research.
No, folks have to get back to studio. Yeah, but maybe we'll take one more question here. Awesome.
Yeah, when it comes to working with like oftentimes NGOs or small communities with small budgets, what are some of the strategies that you use to manage that? I know you had mentioned like the apprentice carpenters on the one project, which I thought was interesting, but do you have like a go-to, suppliers or strategy for managing those sorts of situations?
So it's very much depends on the scale of the project. So some of these projects, and now we tend to do more and more of these big anchors in a neighborhood. Like we're just finishing, it's just going out to bid a pair of buildings on the campus of Medgar Evers College in Brooklyn. And there, the city is funding that, and the budget is $130 million for the construction, and it has to be competitively bid and construction managed, and that's a whole different scale than, say, Heritage Health and Housing or that pop-up church that you saw, where we helped them manage the bidding and procurement. And it's much more there isn't any owner's rep or construction manager or somebody. So you have to it helps that Everardo because opportunities for a Black architect, even one as talented as Everardo, were and a promotion path were really, really difficult in New York. He ended up spending 7 years as a construction manager and owner's rep for Yale University. And that really gave him a depth of knowledge in construction that is very rare for a firm owner. And so that gives us, because he is kind of like our knowledge guru in our office, it gives us, he has insights at these different scales, how to take the project to make it buildable and how to work with these different scales and levels of skill of contractors to produce, to help them produce the best thing that they ever produced.
Mhm.
And really, even these giant public projects, he helps set up an atmosphere where the contractors and the subs and the workers in the field are proud of what they're doing, and they understand what they're doing, and they start to take pride in it, and they start to talk about it when you're on the site. And it is a beautiful thing to see that come together and to see people really, really working hard to solve these, to figure out, bring their skill and their knowledge to this to make the building successful.
That's fantastic. Well, let's give Sara Caples another hand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's
And,
really sensitive work. And
hopefully invite us back for a jury or something where we can come in person when the plague isn't floating around New York.
we would love to. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Goodbye. Great. Yeah.